Hi everyone, this is Frank speaking to you on the evening of Tuesday, February 26, 2008. Hope you're all doing well. Thanks for the emails that I've been receiving recently. It's good to hear from some of you. It's kind of an odd process, this. Speaking to an audience I know that's out there. I just 95 or 96% of you, I have no idea who you are or where you are or anything like that. So it's a virtual community, I guess. Anyways, thanks for your patience over the last couple of weeks. I've not been able to provide any actual trading examples, and that unfortunately will be the case this week as well. I'm working feverishly on a couple of large projects with Forex Mentor, and as I mentioned last week, unfortunately, I'm just not getting the chance to trade at night right now, and hopefully that won't last too long. But in any event, still, we have some useful stuff to talk about this week, no doubt, and even without the actual trade examples, hopefully you'll find some value in this. On today's agenda, let Benji out, let Benji in, let Benji out, let Benji in. Actually, I don't even have a dog, so I don't know why I brought that up. Anyways, a very simple agenda. We're going to look at the Four Sisters trade again. I've been receiving a fair amount of email from you folks. A lot of people seem to like this little trade. I do too. It's kind of cool. It's nice just to get in and out of the market with 25 pips if you can do it well enough. The key is to have a high win ratio on this one, folks. If you can't get a high win ratio, don't do it because it goes against the whole concept of high reward to risk. You have to make it on your win ratio. If you only get 60% over time, you're going to end up having to do a lot of work for a few pips. You got to be hitting 80-85% on this one. But the good news is, play around in your sandbox, as Peter says, and if you get good enough at this one, there's no reason why you can't. I mean, the last 10 trades I've taken on this thing have all been winners. I haven't had one losing trade on it, so it can be done. If I can do it, you can do it. That's for sure. But anyway, we're going to talk about working the Four Sisters setup on different time frames, not just the 3-minute chart where we looked at it first, and we're also going to talk about an alternative exit strategy. Before we get into all of that, though, there's just one little issue I wanted to talk to you about. Some people with some technical difficulties there, it looks like, on their computer. I've received several emails now over the last, I would say, 2 weeks from folks who are saying they are reporting that they've been having some difficulty viewing the weekly chart review. And their comment indicates that there's been some kind of a lag between the video and the audio, and maybe some distortion, I believe, in the audio. And I wanted to just thank the folks who emailed in about that, because I had no idea that was happening, and I wouldn't have unless you made the contact. So I believe that issue has been resolved now. It had to do with a bug in a previous version of the software that's used to produce these videos. Not on my computer, but elsewhere, and I believe it's been resolved now, so theoretically you shouldn't encounter that again. And if you happen to want to go back over those older installments, I believe over the last 2 weeks, I think you should be able to view them now without any difficulties. The problem that was there should be gone. So that's the word I've heard, and but I just wanted to mention, if you do have any more difficulties of that type, please do email me, frank@forexmentor.com. And I'm absolutely not a technical person. I'm all thumbs with that stuff, but I know who to talk to resolve it. So just let me know if that happens again, and we'll take care of it. So thanks for your patience. I appreciate that very much. And like I say, hopefully you won't experience that again. Okay, again, we're referring to the Four Sisters trade here, and if you're just jumping right into the weekly chart review, if you're a newer subscriber and this is your first one, to make heads or tails of what we're talking about here, you really need to go back to chart of the week number 16, where we talk about the so-called Four Sisters trade, which is kind of a handy-dandy little in and out quasi-scalping technique that seems to offer up some pretty good high probability trade setups, as long as you do it right. That's the key. But what we're going to talk about here is, even though the concept was presented on a 3-minute time frame, Don't ask me why I get that predilection for the 3 minutes. I haven't a clue. It's why it's not the 5 minute, I don't know. There's something magical about the number 3. I know it's the first number in the Fibonacci sequence. That's it. Anyway, or no, maybe it's not the first. I guess it's the third. Oh well, whatever. We're going to talk about using this setup on different time frames. Now, the first comment I just want to make here, I mean, this is a dead simple issue we're going to address here, but it's well, sometimes the dead simple ones are most important. If you did try to apply this thing on a 3 minute chart as a scalping tool, as I suggested a couple weeks ago, remember we also talked about how you don't have to use a 3 minute. You could do this on a 5 minute or a 10 or 15, what have you. Just wanted to point out that sometimes what may appear to happen is that just because you don't see the rules unfolding that we talked about, the four sisters, how we need bullish or bearish stacking, angle and separation between the four EMAs, on one time frame, you can sometimes find a valid trade on a higher time frame. So if you're looking at a 3 minute chart, or if you prefer 5 minutes or whatever you're working with as your lowest low-level time frame, and you don't see it, don't give up. Look at multiple time frames for the currency pair in question. Let's say you're working with pound yen and your chart template has 6 different charts. Go through all of them. See where you might find one. Now, of course, the downside is the higher the time frame that you try to work this thing on, the wider your parabolic stops are going to be. It's just, it's not always necessarily the case. I mean, sometimes you can get a nice tight stop even on a 60-minute chart. But generally speaking, the higher the time frame, the wider the stop. So, of course, that affects your reward to risk performance. But if you want to start trying this thing out on an hourly chart, just match your limit target to the higher amount of risk you're taking. So if instead of a 25 pip stop, you're consistently getting a 50 pip stop, then just set your limit at 50 pips instead. You never want to, shoot for less than a 1-to-1 reward to risk with this thing. So, you can perfectly well find a setup on the 60-minute chart or what have you. So like I say, just if you don't find it on the first time frame you're looking on, just, scroll through your other time frames, see if you can find one there. And if you do find the setup, the four sister setup on a higher time frame, what do you do? Well, it's simple. You just do it the same way we talked about with the 3 minute chart. You apply the same rules. They're dead simple. You look for the same setup. You do everything the same. As I say, the only thing you might want to tweak is just the scope of your exit target. You wouldn't want to be risking 50 pips on a setup found on a 60-minute chart or a 2-hour chart just to grab a 25 pip limit. That's just not going to work for you over time. So there you have it. That's about as simple as I can state it. Look for the setup wherever you find it. Let's look at an example now that proves this concept. Here's an example, and I apologize, there's some kind of funky colors going on here with these pivots. That's what these horizontal lines are. I'm just trying to find some color scheme that does not involve the use of green or red, because I've got so much green or red on my chart it's getting really confusing. I don't know if I like these any better. Oh well. Anyway, that's what those funky colored lines are there. This is a 3-minute chart for pound USD, and it's for last night relative to where I'm talking. And we're talking about the London Open for Tuesday, the 26th of February. And this is a 3-minute chart. And again, if we had started from this, or if we restricted ourselves only to this chart, relative to the rules presented for this trade, would we have had any reason to get excited here? I don't think so. Our trend indicators are flat as a pancake. And that that breaks rule number 1. Rule number 1 is, are they stacked bullish or bearish? And if so, we look for a trade. If not, we don't. So on this 3-minute time frame, it would kind of suggest there's just nothing to do here. Absolutely nothing. Now, of course, after the fact, if you watch the action for this pair through the London session, the entire London session into the New York session, you know that the story on this pair was we had a bit of a rocket ship to the moon. There was a really nice strong rally on this pair, which in many respects was not surprising relative to a proper top-down analysis, looking at some Fibonacci's and things like that. Also, the commitments of traders have just been grinding this thing, well, I should say grinding their positions longer and longer and longer over the past several weeks. Really, really net long on this one. The US dollar is continuing to show its hand being very weak over the long haul. So really no big surprise. But again, just playing the trade by the rules, there's nothing here to do. I hope you can kind of see that. Let's take a look though at the 15-minute chart and see if it's telling us the same story. All right, so this is the same pair in the same time frame. Well, higher time frame, the 15-minute chart, but time of day, same time of day, London Open, the 26th of February. Is this not an entirely different picture from what we saw in the 3-minute chart? Let's take a look at our four sisters, or whatever you want to call them, 4 EMAs, doesn't matter. 800, not huge positive slope, but it is there. It's painting in green. Price was above it. 400 bullish, 200 bullish, 100 bullish. They're all stacked bullish. Do you see that? This is a pretty darn clear trend reading on this time frame. And when you get this on a 15-minute chart, it will tend to be more indicative than if you get it on the 3-minute chart. But nonetheless, we saw nothing on the 3-minute chart. Here we see the makings of a possible trade. So the trend is up. In the background earlier in the day, well, back 24 hours as a matter of fact, we had a rally up to about 96.80, somewhere in there. This is a retracement. You see where the parabolic is painting in red. Classic leg 1 up, retracement. We're looking for a leg 2 up. So I mean, you can take note of that or not as you wish. It doesn't. Those rules, or I should say, that description doesn't apply to the trade setup we're talking about. But it certainly doesn't hurt to do some good old-fashioned technical analysis here. But anyway, we got then the a floppy, sloppy, but nonetheless real bullish crossover of the SMI. In the last chart you saw we had the zero lag MACD, and this one I've got the SMI. You can see where we're getting to the point, folks, where in actuality it doesn't even really matter after a while what the particular indicator is that you're using. It's just how you combine an indicator with other stuff that you're doing. I love MACD to death. It's my favorite all-time indicator, but at the end of the day, an indicator is just an indicator. You know, it's not the engine block. Here we have the reversal that we're looking for, which coincidentally happens as price is just sort of hugging the central pivot for support. This is a GMT pivot. It's not a New York pivot, just as a reminder. But yet another example showing you that this alternative scheme does work well. We saw price rose up, came down, found support there. And so we got the parabolic flip occurring around about 2 o'clock. I think I've got the details elsewhere. Can't remember. Anyway, this is about 2 a.m., just ahead of the London Open. This is actually the Frankfurt Open. So you see parabolic flipped with the opportunity to go long. And a really nice, big, huge rally here. Starting off at 96.60, yeah, we went up well over 200 pips. 220 pips actually. And there was some news, certainly. There was, I can't remember if there was some UK news coming in at 4:30 last night, but there's certainly some really bad economic news out of the US today. Just put them back to back, and those reports look awful. By the way, just as a footnote, you want to hark back several weeks earlier where we had an installment talking about the news. And the thesis we're putting out there is the news does not really drive the market. It's something else. And I think if you want proof of that, you should probably look at what happened to the Dow Jones Industrial Average today vis-a-vis all the negative U.S. news that came out. If news drives the market, and given that it was overwhelmingly bad news for the U.S. economy, why would the Dow Jones rally? That makes just no sense at all. But it just, you know, you can find a billion examples like that. Anyway, I digress. The point is here that we did not see the indicator setup, or the trade setup, I should say, on the 3-minute chart, but we did see it on the 15-minute chart. So this is perfectly valid, and we could have entered the trade the same way. Topic number 2 here for today, we're going to talk about an alternative exit strategy, alternative to the one that involves the use of a 25 pip sort of generic limit out. Trailing stops. trailing stops. I'm sure just about everybody viewing this probably knows what a trailing stop is. Basically, as price moves, it moves your stop up or down accordingly. So what we're going to do here is we're going to apply the entry rules on the Four Sisters trade the exact same way we did previously. And we're even going to set the initial protective stop the exact same way as well. We're going to use the parabolic value. And a couple of people have rightly pointed out along the way some emails on this, asking the question, well, I saw this stop that said it was, 7 pips, and that just seems ridiculously tight. Is it okay to widen that? And the answer is absolutely yes, of course. Parabolic is tight, but sometimes it's just like so tight it just doesn't seem believable. So you might want to just create a rule for yourself that says assign a stop value equal to parabolic with a minimum of 15 pips or 20 pips, something in there that just gives we don't have to get too carried away with this tight stop strategy. It's a good thing to have because you're never going to risk the farm on a given trade, but we don't want to take ourselves out just by hemming price action in too far either. So what we're going to do here, instead of using our generic or vanilla 25 pip limit, we're not going to use a limit at all. We're going to let the trailing stop take us out of the market. If we're going long, we're going to hope that it triggers at least twice. And then eventually when price hits a pivot or some other kind of area of support or resistance, of course, it's going to pull back on us. And if it pulls back far enough, then that will take us out of the trade. And it's just, from the simplicity point of view, it's the same thing as doing a 25 pip limit out, because we just set it and forget it. And we let the market do the rest of the work for us. Now, just a footnote here. So how do you decide whether to use a vanilla limit or a trailing stop? And I guess generically what you'd want to do, excuse me, I'm fighting a cold this week here, is you would want to have some kind of evidence that the market you're trading into is strongly trending, okay? Because if it's not really strongly trending, if it's just sort of chopping around, you can set a trailing stop and price can go a little ways in your favor, and then it just sort of runs out of gas and then bobs and weaves its way around for hours and hours and hours, and the net result is your trailing stop might get triggered, but you might end up with nothing. So, you want to see that stacking really sharp, a really strong, robust rallying market or a swooning market. You want to have some idea when you're getting into this trade that the thing's going to continue on for some time. In other words, you want to have reason for a higher profit target. So here's the method in a nutshell. Apply the initial protective stop the same way using the parabolic as we've talked about with the MACD parabolic system and this Four Sisters trade, and just calculate what's the size of that interval from my initial protective stop. And for an example, let's just say it's 24 pips. So what you want to do is in your order window, your dealing platform, you want to use that number as the trailing increment. And you don't have to do it that way. You can do it any way you want, but it's the benefit of doing that way is that if you get at least one trail or one trailing increment triggered, then the worst you'll do is end up at break even on your trade, exactly at break even. If your stop is 24 pips and the market manages to go 24 pips in your favor, but then runs out of gas and comes back against you, well, you'll know that the worst that'll happen is you'll have a goose egg in your closed positions window. But if you don't like that, and there's sometimes reason to not like that, you can certainly experiment with a wider trailing increment. As a matter of fact, there's good reason to consider doing that. You might want to apply a rule that says set the stop at level X, set the trailing increment at 2X, and what that will do is the trailing increment, of course, will trigger less often, but it will eliminate some of the risk of being pulled out of the market on a perfectly good trade just because of some interim noise. So the way this thing works, of course, is that each time price moves another 24 pips, as in this example, your stop gets pulled up by that amount. So you're always trying to be behind the price action by a certain margin until the thing collapses on you. So the first trailing increment would bring you to break even. If the thing goes 24 pips in your favor and stops and goes against you, then it might trigger. If it collapses all the way against you, then you'll be booted out of the market at break even. But if it goes another 24 pips, then you'll be guaranteed a 24 pip profit. So in other words, by this time, if you do nothing else, price has moved 48 pips, but because the initial trail is 24 pips behind price, then you're guaranteed 24 pips profit. And then if it goes another 24 pips for a total of, what would that be? That would be 72 pips. Then you're guaranteed 48, etc., etc., etc. So I could have showed how to set a trailing stop increment on my dealing platform, but everybody uses a different broker, and I'm sure you know how to do that by now anyway. If anybody doesn't, or if you're a newbie and you still don't know what a trailing stop is, just give me an email and we'll see if we can pull something together. So I'm going to show you a chart now that kind of illustrates this concept. Okay, here we have a 3-minute chart for pound Swissy. Again, the same time frame, the London Open, or Frankfurt Open, I guess, of February 26th. And the Four Sisters are stacked long. We can see that here, coming all the way through the tail end of the New York session into the Asian Open. And here we are. We remain a little bit of redness here, but that's okay. Still stacked bullish, so still thinking 25 pip scalp. Now these horizontal lines are not pivots. Don't make that mistake. What I've drawn in here is some lines that are going to help us understand the trailing stop, the mechanics of it. So the first thing I want to do here is say, okay, we're stacked long, and let's just make the leap of faith that I've validated this long entry signal with respect to whatever oscillator I'm using on the 15-minute chart, be it MACD, zero lag MACD, SMI, what have you. Doesn't really matter after a while. So I'm going long here at 1:39 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. This price here, 14.19, of course, is just the 4-digit shorthand that we've been talking about for some time. That's this candle right here, where it flips, parabolic flips from red to green. And my initial stop, again, this is an example of where it can be too tight. Parabolic says I only have to use an 11 pip stop. I mean, you can go ahead and do that. There's nothing wrong with that. 11 pips, boy, if that's all we ever had to risk, life would be sweet. However, be aware that you are more likely to get bounced out just based on random noise than if you give it a little bit more room. So that's what I did here. I said, okay, if I were actually taking this trade, because I was trading, my entry point was at 14.19, and let's just assume away dealer spread for a bit. Pound Swissy tends to be a slightly expensive pair, but I'm just going to ignore spread for a second. I'm just talking strictly textbook here. So 14.19, a 20 pip wide spread would put me at 13.99. I don't know if you can see the number here. It's a little bit fuzzy. Apologize for that, but that's what this horizontal line is here. Okay, that's the level that coincides with my initial protective stop relative to this entry point. So we get in, and then price advances 20 pips. Okay, so this is where the trailing stop would be triggered the first time. So that doesn't put the stop to this level, of course. It just pulls up the stop from the previous level by 20 pips. So it was at 13.99. Now it's going to be pulled up 20 pips to 14.19. What's 14.19? Well, that's equal to our entry point. So you can see how using this technique, just matching the trailing increment to the size of your protective stop, it'll give you exactly a break even in the worst case scenario. I mean, assuming price goes at least that far. You're not guaranteed a break even. I just want to make sure everybody understands that. But as long as price moves that far, you will be guaranteed a break even. So that's what happened here. So we're now 20 pips into the black on our trade. And so then what happens next? Well, what we see happens next, price goes another 20 pips. And again, this 20 pips, there's nothing magical about this. This is just a fairly arbitrary, kind of discretionary increment I used here. I said parabolic is giving me permission to use tighter than that. I'm just going to widen it a little. So, I could have said 25 pips. I could have said 18 pips. Doesn't really matter. It's just how I chose to apply this thing. And that's probably how I'd do it. I would use either 15 or 20 pips if I was widening a stop. But anyway, we saw what happened here. Now the market advanced another 20 pips. It's at 14.59. That's 40 pips to the good relative to our entry point, assuming away our dealer spread. And so what that does, as soon as price gets to here, the broker's dealing platform says, okay, tick, tick, tick. We've moved 20 pips, tick, tick, tick. Let's move this thing up. So now all of a sudden, the stop that was trailed to break even is now up at 14.39, which is 20 pips to the good from where we got in. So what that'll do is that'll guarantee us now, our worst case scenario is no longer break even. It is now entry plus 20. 20 pips minimum is the profit we're going to pull out of this trade. But this is a really interesting example because it shows what can happen. Price rose to this level for whatever reason. I don't have the pivots painted in here. Maybe this was, an R pivot or something. And then it fell. And it fell where? Well, it fell against our trailed stop and further. And I didn't show the full extent of this thing. Pound Swissy, just basically the story on this pair last night was just chop, chop, chop. It was going up and down, up and down. So if we were holding tough for a bigger trade, we might not have gotten it last night anyway, even if we just left our stop down here. But that's okay because this was a trade that we were in at 139. We were out by about 3:30, so maybe 2 hours. Took us 2 hours to pull out an easy 20 pips on one pair. And again, these are not super impressive trades. Like you wouldn't go around bragging about them, showing off to your friends. Ooh, look how fancy I am. But that's not the point. The point is we want to make steady, consistent gains in this market. It's not a random market, but it's a chaotic market. So, if you can consistently nail modest wins and string them together back to back, that's how you're going to make your millions in this business. Good book to read. I haven't even seen it yet, but I'd really like to get my hands on it. Is the Way of the Turtle, I think it's called. It's about those guys called the Turtle Traders. And the story was there was this really well-to-do trader. He'd made his millions and gazillions of dollars, and he had a bet with a friend who was also a successful trader. He said that I can turn anybody into a trader in 2 weeks. And his friend didn't believe that theory at all. He thought that traders are born, not made. And so their bet was he was going to do this. So he took a handful of 20 people who had no trading experience, but a desire to succeed, and he taught them, and they all made millions. And I don't know the full story, but I believe their trading system was something fairly modest. Not like this necessarily, but these guys weren't PhDs in macroeconomics sitting around talking about fractal this and parabolic that. They just, obviously, to learn how to trade successfully in 2 weeks, you would have had to have a real simple, consistent system. And that's what we're looking at here, a simple, consistent system when applied intelligently and judiciously. So anyway, that's kind of a rundown on how you can use trailing stops with this Four Sisters trade. We're just going to give you a summary of that right now. Okay, here we have kind of the pluses and minuses of this exit strategy. As I hope you know by now, if anything, at least I try to be honest about all this stuff. Trailing stops are sometimes good, but sometimes you can just get bounced out a little too easily. So you kind of have to make up your mind whether 25 pips is good enough for you or you want a higher target. And maybe there's other ways to go about that. I'm going to show one other exit strategy to be used with this system next week that involves the use of pivots. But anyway, I guess on the pros side of the balance sheet, the trailing stop strategy can sometimes be superior to our vanilla exit limit of 25 pips because it may on occasion keep you in the trade longer. So if the market is really taken off relative to your entry point, you might be able to score a greater number of pips if the thing works the way it's supposed to. But on the downside, if price only goes a small amount in your favor and then snaps back, you could wind up with a break-even trade, whereas if you used the other exit strategy, that would of course be 25 pips. So that's the pros and the cons, and I hope you've enjoyed this presentation. Thanks very much for your support, and we'll talk to you next week.